All right, Frank, time for Icebreakers brought to you by UFC 289. Saturday night, that has taken place in Vancouver. The card has 6 Canadians on it, and it is headlined by Nunes versus Aldana. You don't want to miss UFC's return to Canada. It is available on pay-per-view. Frank, we've got a new number one on the board this week. Severson's off. Who leads your list? Who's number one and why?
It's Pierre-Luc Dubois from the Winnipeg Jets. I said last week, Mike, that this is the summer of Chevy. And just take a look at our trade targets board and the top 5. That'll tell you why that's the case. We now know, and probably not that much of a shock, but Pierre-Luc Dubois requesting a trade formally from the Jets, telling them that he's not going to re-sign there. They're kind of backed up against the wall. Yeah, they could fight it, and they could essentially force a contract from Pierre-Luc Dubois saying, look, we're going to give you the qualifying offer, and then you can go through the arbitration process, and then we'll produce a 1-year award that will then walk you 1 year from now to free agency. Doesn't seem like that's the way that the Winnipeg Jets are going to handle it. And this is a 24-year-old center with some size and some heft who's put up back-to-back 60-plus point seasons. I think a guy that teams – we were just talking about the Minnesota Wild and their need for a center. How many other teams in this league, whether it's, pick another team that's like the Columbus Blue Jackets, they're dying for help down the middle. I know Dubois doesn't make any sense.
That's not going to happen.
Yeah. But the point being, there's a number of teams that just can't do enough to get their hands on a guy like this. And now he's available. And now Mark Scheifele is available. So to get a player in that age range who you can then re-sign with that type of longer-term stability in view. I think the Jets, there's 2 ways to look at the Jets, Mike. One, you're sort of scared and you're saying, wow, woe is us. All these players, they're not coming back. And 2, the other way is what an opportunity this is for Kevin Cheveldayoff to remold and reshape the Jets into Jets 3.0, what the next version of this team looks like, led by guys like Kyle Connor and Nick Ehlers and Josh Morrissey, that you have a bunch of incredibly valuable pieces, the premier goalie on the market in Connor Hellebuck, the premier centers in Dubois and Scheifele, that if you want, you can have the rest of the NHL's GMs eating out of the palm of your hand. That's the way that I would look at it as opposed to the negative view. So Dubois now rocketing to the top of the list after the trade request. Buckle up. It's going to be fascinating.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see who wants a player under 25 that's already requested to be traded twice. I'm very curious to see that. So 4 pieces.
It's funny, wait, before you go on, like no one really said boo about Adam Fox because once he landed in the place that he wanted to get to, he's content and then went out and won a Norris Trophy. Not saying that's necessarily going to happen with Dubois, but sometimes a player has a place in his mind or different place that he's like, I got to get there.
Yeah, so did Jimmy Vesey, and he's taken the tour of the NHL before coming back to the Rangers eventually too. So we'll see. I hope he ends up happy so he can perform because he is a quality number 2, maybe number 1 center in Dubois. So 4 pieces from your top 25 were traded in a 3-way deal for Provorov earlier this week. So unquestionably, that means Danny Briere, the new GM of the Philadelphia Flyers, he's open for business. One of those may be goaltender Carter Hart. Where do things stand with the talented netminder?
Well, you're a big fan of Carter Hart. I know that. I know that you think when you look at his save percentage, you've mentioned this before, that he's, and you wrote a story about it this week, that even that number, he played better than that number would indicate and has the talent and pedigree, of course, to get there and get to that next level among NHL netminders, needs better support in front of him. And I would agree. I think there are a number of other teams that agree and are interested. I'll tell you that I don't think anything's imminent. The Flyers are listening, but I don't think they're pushing by any means to move Carter Hart, much in the same way that they felt like they had to do something with Ivan Provorov. They know they have to do something with Kevin Hayes. I'd imagine the similar type of conversation will come up with someone like Tony DeAngelo as well. So that's the Flyers' thought process. And I've asked a bunch of teams around the league, Mike, what do you think of Carter Hart and where does this go? Would your team, I'd ask a GM, be in the market for Carter Hart? And I got to tell you, I'm going to say the thing that hasn't really been said publicly, but is definitely under the surface behind the scenes, is a lot of teams are leery about any player's connection to the 2018 Team Canada World Junior Championship team, that knowing that this investigation is complete, knowing that there may be punishment or may not that comes on the other end of it, no one really wants to go crazy trading for a player to then potentially have that player sit out. So not saying anything about Carter Hart and his potential involvement in that. I think it covers the entire roster, quite literally. A bunch of GMs are sitting around saying, what do we do with this guy? We're in a tough spot. And I think that's what is impacting or could potentially impact any sort of deal involving Carter Hart until we have some clarity.
Man, even the players that have denied any involvement and have,
which has mostly been the whole team, by the way.
Yeah,
if you're accused of sexual assault, I mean, maybe no one really cares after that if they also call you a liar.
Well, I guess we're going to find out. So let's move along. Turn the page on that one. Another team that was featured prominently in your piece, that's the Vancouver Canucks. They had 2 players inside your top 10. How aggressive do you expect the Canucks to be over the course of this offseason?
Yeah, pretty aggressive. And it starts with Conor Garland. I'm told they've been working the phones pretty feverishly the last few weeks, trying to at least find the best price available. They have to do something. Yeah, they have a little LTIR flexibility, but they're essentially over the cap or right at it when you consider that they still have a couple other players to sign. And so Garland is the guy, for whatever reason, that they've put out there and said, we give us a price. I wonder, Mike, what the impact is of the LA Kings being able to move Cal Peterson and Sean Walker. That's almost $8 million in salary. And I know for them, it was a net change of 6 because they also took some on in the Ivan Provorov deal. But nonetheless, a lot of people were surprised, saying it didn't feel like they gave up that much to be able to move $8 million of salary cap space. Now, when it comes to Garland, a guy who still produces, he may not be your ideal fit as an undersized guy, but someone that still rings up 50, 55 points pretty routinely at $4.9 million. Like, he's not totally out of whack. And I think that's how the Canucks view it. It's just that no one really wants to give the Canucks a get out of jail free card when it comes to their situation. So everyone's sort of driving a hard bargain, and they've found to this point, I believe, that the price is still pretty high in order to do what they want to do.
Kind of wild, man. Like Conor Garland a year or two ago was toast of the league. It felt like everybody wanted him, and I'd still love to have him on my roster. Does a bit of everything. So funny to see that Vancouver is in that position. Frank, great job as always. That'll do it for this week's Icebreakers, brought to you by UFC 289 on Saturday night at Rogers Arena in Vancouver and in your living room on pay-per-view.